In late 2000, a pair of photographs were mailed to the Sarasota Sheriff's Office by an individual who wished to remain anonymous. These photos depicted what appeared to be some kind of large ape-like creature. For more than 20 years, skeptics and cryptozoologists alike have been debating their authenticity, making the creature that would become known as the Myakka Ape one of the most divisive subjects in the cryptid community. In this video, we will explore the history of the images, as well as the arguments in favor and against them being evidence of an unknown primate. We will also look at the case of the Myakka Ape in the context of the wider Skunk Ape mythos, and question what could possibly be out there stalking the backwoods of Florida. Before we can delve into the question of what the Myakka Ape was, there is a fairly interesting backstory to these mysterious photos, and how they came to be released to the public at large. From what I can tell, the most complete version of the story comes from noted cryptozoologist Loren Coleman, and his book, Bigfoot, The True Story of Apes in America. So that is the version of events we'll be going with, as well as Coleman's blog posts about the events from the early 2000s. That said, the general details of this backstory have been confirmed by multiple different sources. As the story goes, in late December of 2000, a letter was sent to the Sarasota Sheriff's Office, containing the aforementioned photographs, as well as a letter from a concerned citizen claiming to be the photographer. The letter tells the story of an anonymous senior citizen living somewhere near I-75 in Sarasota, Florida. For reference, this could be anywhere in this general area. You might notice that this is fairly close to the Myakka River State Park, which is one of the largest and oldest parks in the state of Florida. The author claims to have encountered a large creature with a pungent odor that they believe to be an orangutan. According to the letter, the animal had been stealing apples off their back porch for 2 nights prior. Their friend in animal control up north suggested they call the police, but they didn't want people traipsing through their yard with guns. They also state their concern that the orangutan could hurt someone, either by getting hit by a car or potentially by giving them hepatitis. Apparently, the letter was postmarked December 22nd and was received by the sheriff's office on the 29th. Due to the holidays, it went largely unnoticed. When people finally started to take note of the strange letter, it seems to have been treated as a bit of a joke, with people passing the letters around to amuse each other. No file was created, and no case number was assigned. However, for reasons that remain unknown, something changed, and the sheriff's office supposedly started to regard the orangutan problem more seriously. At some point, a member of the Animal Control Division contacted David Barksey, owner of the local Silver City Serpentarium. On January 3rd, Barksey was given black and white copies of the 2 photos, as well as details about the case of the troublesome orangutan. Barksey was familiar with the story of the Skunk Ape, and sought assistance and opinions on the photos by contacting cryptozoologist Loren Coleman, as well as Hawk and Karen Spearman, who were moderators of a Bigfoot emailing list at the time. On January 11th, Barksey borrowed the second of the 2 photos and made copies and scans of the image. Unbeknownst to Barksey, while he was trying to get more information about the case through unofficial channels, Hawk Spearman contacted the sheriff's office directly and demanded copies of the photographs as part of public records laws. Apparently, this resulted in Barksey's friend at the sheriff's office being reprimanded. Following this incident, the photos were given an official case number and file. As they were now part of an official case, Barksey had to be escorted by a police courier when he wanted to make further copies and scans. Just take a moment to picture that scene unfolding. You're an employee at your local Kinko's, just minding your own business, when in walks a man with a police escort. What could this be about? A robbery? Murderer on the loose? No, they're just making copies of a photo of a giant monkey. In another installment of the Spearman intrusions, Hawk would publish the less detailed color copies of the photos to his Bigfoot mailing list on February 4th, with what Loren Coleman described as only the slightest of details on the circumstances of the report. This is actually a bit more significant than it seems, because Barksey and Coleman were trying to put out a more complete report on the photos, while Hawk was basically just posting low-res images to his email buddies. A lot of the finer details seen in the high-res scans are missing from said reproductions, which are still floating out there on the internet. This has probably led to much of the confusion and disagreements regarding these photos even to this day. When the photos began to circulate, the story was picked up by media outlets across Florida and beyond. Most of these articles are no longer available, but I did manage to find an archived article by the Tampa Tribune from February 14th of 2001, which includes this incredible line. Quote, Michelle at the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office faxed me some materials, along with a cryptic note. Don't monkey around with this. End quote. Part of me doubts that the Sarasota Sheriff's Office was actually taking the orangutan problem all that seriously. David Barksey eventually managed to track the photos back to an Eckerd photo lab at the intersection of Fruitville and Tuttle, off I-75, where he learned that they were taken in fall and developed in December of 2000. But beyond that, the circumstances of the photos remain a mystery. Barksey would continue to search for the ape, making late-night treks into the Myakka State Park, and stringing up apples on fishing lines to bait the creature, without much success. He would later say in an interview that he was told by a state ranger to leave the park because the land he was on was owned by the Southwest Florida Water Management District. To be in the park after hours, he would need a permit that he had not obtained. This is honestly about where the backstory of the Myakka Ape photos ends. Some people have claimed to know the location where the photos were shot, or who was behind the hoax, but in the last 22 years we've never publicly learned where the photos were taken or who sent them into the Sarasota Sheriff's Office. The Myakka Skunk Ape case is fairly unique, even among cryptid encounters, because the encounter itself is as mysterious and polarizing as the images of the creature. For over 2 decades, people have debated whether the letter sent into the Sarasota Sheriff's Office was evidence of a hoax or a legitimate encounter with an unknown primate. There are a few questionable elements, and if I'm being honest, it's just kind of peculiar as a whole. I'm going to read the entire letter because it's not that long and some of the points mentioned are relevant to the images we'll talk about later. Quote, "Dear Sir or Madam, enclosed, please find some pictures I took in late September or early Oct of 2000. My husband says he thinks it's an orangutan. Is someone missing an orangutan? It's hard to judge from the photos how big this orangutan really is. It is in a crouching position in the middle of standing up from where it was sitting. It froze as soon as the flash went off. I didn't even see it as I took the first picture because it was so dark. As soon as the flash went off for the second time, it stood up and started to move. I then heard the orangutan walk off into the brushes. From where I was standing, I judge it as being about 6.5 to 7 feet tall in a kneeling position. As soon as I realized how close it was, I got back to the house. It had an awful smell that lasted well after it had left my yard. The orangutan was making deep whoomp noises. It sounded much farther away than it turned out to be. If I had known it was as close to the hedgerow as it was, I wouldn't have walked up as close as I did. I'm a senior citizen, and if this animal had come out of the hedgerow after me, there wasn't a thing I could have done about it. I was about 10 foot away from it when it stood up. I'm concerned because my grandchildren like to come down and explore in my backyard. An animal this big could hurt someone seriously. For 2 nights prior, it had been taking apples that my daughter brought down from up north, off our back porch. These pictures were taken on the 3rd night it had raided my apples. It only came back one more night after that, and took some apples that my husband had left out in order to get a better look at it. We left out 4 apples. I cut 2 of them in half. The orangutan only took the whole apples. We didn't see it take them. We waited up, but eventually had to go to bed. We got a dog back there now, and as far as we can tell, the orangutan hasn't been back. Please find out where this animal came from and who it belongs to. It shouldn't be loose like this. Someone will get hurt. I called a friend that used to work with animal control back up north, and he told us to call the police. I don't want any fuss or people with guns traipsing around behind our house. We live near I-75, and I'm afraid this orangutan could cause a serious accident if someone hit it. I once hit a deer that wasn't even a quarter of the size of this animal, and I totaled my car. At the very least, this animal belongs in a place like Busch Gardens, where it can be looked after properly. Why haven't people been told that an animal this size is loose? How are people to know how dangerous this could be? If I had known an animal like this was loose, I wouldn't have approached it. I saw on the news that monkeys that get loose can carry hepatitis and are very dangerous. Please look after this situation. I don't want my backyard to turn into someone else's circus. God bless. I prefer to remain anonymous." End quote. One of the main criticisms made against this letter is that the author refers to the creature as an orangutan. Their husband thinks it's an orangutan. Is somebody missing an orangutan? Yet, the author also judged the creature to be 6.5 to 7 feet tall in a kneeling position. They think it's big enough to total someone's car, should they hit it. Surely a self-professed senior citizen, who also appears to be tech-savvy enough to type this letter out in a word processing program, would know that orangutans aren't that big, right? Well, one of the most common arguments made by skeptics against cryptid sightings is that humans have a hard time judging the size of animals, particularly if there's nothing to reference for scale. Could the author simply have been mistaken about the size? Probably not, as the palmettos in the picture would have given an accurate idea of scale. I can't say how tall they are, but 6 feet wouldn't seem out of the question. So then how did they mistake something so big for an orangutan? Well, how big do you think an orangutan is? Without Googling it, how tall are they and how much do they weigh? Did you think something like 6 feet tall and 300 to 400 pounds? If you did, you'd be way off, and you're a person who has unfettered access to all of humankind's knowledge at your fingertips. Not a senior citizen with at best a dial-up modem. There are probably hundreds of animals I could ask you the size of, and you'd be way off with your guesses. Does the idea that somebody could look at this creature and mistake it for an orangutan seem a bit hard to believe? Sure, but skeptics also think people are constantly mistaking bears walking on their hind legs for unknown primates. If you're willing to believe that, is it so hard to believe that somebody might think our cryptid in question was an orangutan? Another criticism of the letter is the fact that the person who sent it in preferred to remain anonymous and didn't call the cops because they didn't want any fuss or people with guns traipsing around behind their house. While that is a little suspicious, I can understand why somebody reporting something like this would want to remain anonymous. Most people don't want to be known as the crazy old person who called the cops because they saw a giant monkey in their backyard. On the other hand, if I saw this in my backyard, I'm calling somebody. It could be the cops, it could be Steve Irwin, it could be fucking Steven Seagal for all I care. Whoever can handle a giant ape raiding my apples in the middle of the night. It just seems a bit inconsistent to me that the author of this letter is worried about their grandchildren encountering this creature, but they were baiting the thing with more apples. You don't have to be Jack Hanna to understand how bad of an idea that is when you have an Anthony Cumia level threat to minors roaming around your backyard. They're concerned enough to send a letter to the police, but also not concerned enough to call them or say exactly where they live. And they waited several months, so they're in no hurry either. Maybe they just didn't want the animal to get shot Harambe style. They did seem worried about the animal getting hit by a car and thought it should be in Busch Gardens where it could be looked after properly. Then there are the apples. Let's get back to the apples because that part really sticks out to me as especially strange. Who keeps apples outside? I get not putting them in the fridge, but is space at such a premium in your house that you can't even bring them indoors? The apples your daughter lovingly brought you from back up north, no less. It's peculiarities like this, or the author repeatedly misspelling hedgerow as hedgeroll, that I find fascinating about this letter. If you were a hoaxer, why would you include these elements in your letter that one would imagine you want to sound as convincing as possible, not like a bizarre Joe Biden rant? A skeptic might say that the hoaxer included these bewildering tidbits to seem less suspicious, because they make you wonder why somebody would include them. Personally, I think that is why the letter is so polarizing and so intriguing. Similar to the photographs, the letter is like a horoscope. You can read almost any interpretation you want out of it. Before I discuss these images, and the arguments made both in favor of and against them, I should say that I'm not a primate expert, nor am I particularly knowledgeable about forensic photographic analysis. So take everything I say here with a grain of salt, and do your own research on these subjects if you feel so inclined. I'm mostly just going to present some of the arguments I've seen for and against the authenticity of these two images. With that out of the way, there have been many suggestions and theories as to what exactly these photos depict. One of the earliest suggestions was that the creature was a cutout of some kind, perhaps made of cardboard or plywood. I can't dismiss this theory out of hand, but I don't find it very likely either. Regardless of whether or not the creature in the photos is an undiscovered primate, it appears to have form and dimension. Furthermore, when you look towards the bottom of the image, you can see some kind of appendage which is sandwiched between layers of foliage. That seems like it would be hard to achieve with a flat piece of cardboard. Also, there is clear movement between the two pictures, as the author of the letter said, which rules out a stationary, unchanging object. Whatever this thing is, I lean towards it being a three-dimensional object rather than a 2D cutout. Additionally, I don't agree with the idea that this was some kind of Bigfoot display either. Famously, people have claimed that the Myakka Ape looks like a Bigfoot display from a Ripley's Believe It or Not, located in Wisconsin Dells, but I just don't see the resemblance. The image of the Wisconsin Dells Bigfoot display is pretty hard to make out, but it clearly has an entirely different pose from the Myakka Ape. Every other Ripley's Believe It or Not Bigfoot display piece I can find has a similar posture as well, which represents the traditional upright posture associated with Bigfoot or Sasquatch, whereas the Myakka Ape is more hunched over. The most obvious suggestion about the nature of the Myakka Ape has always been that it was a person in a suit. If this was a hoax, I believe the suit theory is probably the likeliest answer. That does come with some caveats, though. In a May 2006 letter to BigfootEncounters.com, a primate specialist from Japan named Mitsuko Choden supposedly revealed that the Myakka Ape was a Costume familiar to them in assorted colors with plastic teeth molded in the fashion of great apes. Choden added that the photograph expressed no body, arm, or leg definition that would lend itself to the great apes. That said, I couldn't turn up anything about Mitsuko Choden. I'm not saying this person isn't real, but it does seem a bit suspicious that all you get when you Google Mitsuko Choden are tweets and articles referencing this comment from BigfootEncounters.com. More to the point, the idea that this was a mass-produced ape costume seems really doubtful to me, for a few reasons. In the 17 years since this comment by Choden was published by Bigfoot Encounters, no examples of this supposedly common ape suit from Japan have been produced. There are a few commercially available high-quality ape suits out there, but they are quite expensive, thousands of dollars easily. Yet even they barely seem on par with what the Myakka Ape photos depict, and this is with another 20 years of technological advancement. But there is another issue. There may be relatively realistic-looking gorilla and orangutan suits available, but they do not look like the Myakka Ape, because the Myakka Ape does not really resemble any known ape, or even most depictions of Bigfoot. It has the muzzle and shaggy hair of an orangutan, but from the second picture we can see that there is a pronounced brow ridge, like that of a chimp or gorilla. It would also likely be larger than even the largest known specimens of lowland gorillas. What it does depict, in my opinion at least, is a skunk ape. The large unknown apes sighted in the southeast, and particularly Florida, generally have an appearance distinct from that of other Bigfoot-like creatures. They are usually described as shorter and more ape-like, with proportionally longer arms and a hunched-over posture, rather than the upright, more human-like posture and proportions associated with the traditional Bigfoot. There is also the eye shine, which is especially problematic. Eye shine like this is the result of a reflective structure in the eyes of some mammals known as a tapetum lucidum, which allows for better vision in low-light environments. As far as I'm aware, no large primates have a tapetum lucidum. The really interesting thing here is that the eye shine becomes less pronounced between the first and second image, which is what you would expect to see from an animal whose vision was adjusted to the dark, then suddenly had a bright light flashed in their eyes, causing the pupils to shrink. Some people have also suggested that the creature in this image is displaying what is referred to as a primate fear response or grimace. As I said previously, I am not a primate expert, so that is really hard for me to speak on. I could see that being the case, but it could also be people seeing what they want to see from these images. Either way, if this was a hoax, they paid extremely close attention to the details as far as what you would and wouldn't expect to see from a living unknown creature. In the higher res image, you can even see what appears to be toenails on the appendage towards the bottom. If it is some kind of ape costume, I have to imagine it was a custom job. Either it was created entirely from scratch or an existing suit that was heavily modified to create the very unique and lifelike creature shown in these photos. While studying these pictures, I did notice something peculiar though. Did you notice it too? What is this? In front of the creature's face. At first I thought it was a piece of the palm fronds, but upon closer inspection, it clearly isn't attached to the rest of the plant. This is even more noticeable in the second picture, where the creature's head is lifted and tilted back. The leaves move with the creature as it rears its head back, almost like it has a little green mustache. But why? If I want to play devil's advocate for the side arguing that this is a real flesh and blood creature, it looks like in the first picture the creature was about to eat this leaf or palm frond. You can even see what appears to be a little glossy bit of lip. Then, when it pulled back in fear, the plant matter got stuck in its teeth or lips. I've seen the suggestion that the leaf or palm frond, whatever it is, might have been glued to the face of the supposed ape costume to conceal something, such as the fact that the mask didn't have the anatomy of a real mouth, like a tongue or the opening for the throat, etc. Again, I can't rule that out, but it would be a strange decision. Imagine you spent thousands of dollars and untold hours on this hoax, and at the last minute you're like, that mouth doesn't look right. Better glue a leaf to it. Why not just paint the inside of the mouth so it looks darker, or any number of other solutions? On the other hand, only a handful of people appear to have noticed this inconsistency over the course of the last 20 plus years. So if this really is a leaf glued onto a monkey mask, it certainly did get the job done. This brings me to the last major point of debate regarding these images. Were they manipulated or doctored in some way? In his account of events, Loren Coleman states that he showed the Myakka Ape photos to well-known videographic, photographic, and film analyst David Bittner. After seeing the higher quality scans, Bittner was quoted as saying, "I'm pretty impressed with it so far. at least in the terms of it being a real photograph and not a compositing job or a cardboard cutout. That was 20 years ago, though. Forensic photographic analysis techniques have advanced quite a bit during that time. One of these techniques is called error level analysis, which attempts to find differences in compression artifacts in JPEG images to determine if the image has been manipulated. So, I tried running a few of the Myakka Ape photos through error level analysis programs to see if anything interesting turned up. For my understanding of ELA, which is just slightly more than nothing, a strong contrast in the compression artifacts would be a good indicator of digital manipulation, while uniformity is an indicator that the image may not have been manipulated. Though it should be said that this doesn't account for other forms of compositing and manipulation. Some of the images, such as the enlarged photos posted by Coleman and Barksey, seem to show a fair amount of contrast, but how that might be related to whatever process they used to enlarge the images is not something I can speak to. However, when I analyzed the original high-quality versions of the first Myakka Ape photo, the image appeared a lot more consistent, to my untrained eyes at least. What does that mean? I can't really say. Personally, this stuff is way above my pay grade, but I thought maybe somebody watching this video who has a better understanding of ELA could give a keener insight into the subject. After analyzing these photos, as well as the letter explaining the circumstances under which they were taken, I don't believe we've come to an explanation that is conclusive. It could be a person in a Japanese ape costume that has yet to be provided by anyone. Maybe it's a complicated prop. Perhaps this image has been composited in some way. And of course, there is the remote possibility that they are real photos of a heretofore undiscovered ape. But as I said in the beginning, that is part of what makes this case so interesting. People have been debating it for over 2 decades, but they aren't really any closer to an answer. Whether the Myakka Ape is real or a hoax is only one part of the story, though. It may be the most famous account of a skunk ape, but it's still only one of many. People have been seeing this creature for decades, and that is an interesting story in and of itself. Encounters with the creature known as the skunk ape probably go back to pre-colonial times. Like other indigenous people across North America, the Seminole and Muskogee had a legend of a creature they called, and forgive me for my pronunciation, Etsi-Jop-Jockey, or the Tall Man. Perhaps the earliest modern account of an encounter with a skunk ape comes from 1942, when a Suwannee County man reported that the creature rushed out from the brush line, hopped onto the running board of his car, and rode for half a mile before jumping off. Then there is the strange case of the Barden Booger. Starting sometime in the 1940s, the people of the small community of Barden, population 424, have had multiple sightings of a creature with an inconsistent description. In 1947, a woman riding her horse through the woods saw what she believed to be a tall man in a raincoat. Closer inspection revealed that it was not a raincoat, but fur, and that the man was no man at all. Another sighting from 1981 described a legless creature mumbling in a cypress pond by moonlight. Still other stories described a creature with a caveman-like face, wearing dirty, tattered clothes, and with a stench so powerful that a man who tried to shoot the booger was unable to keep his rifle level long enough to fire. That being said, the booger is generally not taken that seriously by the people of Barden, outside of maybe a few old-timers. A gas station in the area sells booger merch, and people generally treat the creature as an amusing part of Barden lore and history. Throughout the 1970s, there was a rash of skunk ape sightings, possibly hundreds, reported across the state of Florida. This increase in sightings is perhaps unsurprising, as in 1972, the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek was released. The film is based on another infamous Bigfoot-like creature known as the Fouke Monster, which allegedly plagued the town of Fouke, Arkansas, prominently in 1971. Now, The Legend of Boggy Creek and the Fouke Monster are a can of worms I don't think I should get into right now, but the film was actually the 11th highest-grossing film of 1972. Skeptics often attribute the explosion of Bigfoot sightings in the 1970s to the influence of this movie, depicting a large, unknown ape-like creature. The sheer number of skunk ape sightings in Florida during the 70s led Republican State Representative Hugh Paul Knuckles to propose House Bill 1664 in 1977, which declared it a misdemeanor to take, possess, harm, or molest anthropoid or humanoid animals, although the bill was ultimately pulled before it could see an official vote. The late 90s were also a fertile period for skunk ape sightings. In 1997, a tour bus traveling through Big Cypress National Park allegedly spotted a skunk ape. This sighting apparently piqued the interest of a local skunk ape enthusiast/researcher named Dave Shealy. Shealy had been pursuing the cryptid for decades after encountering it as a child, After the tour bus incident, Sheely attempted to bait the creature by leaving out plates of lima beans around his property in Ochopee, Florida. No, I'm not kidding. According to Sheely, skunk apes love lima beans. I guess you could say they even go bananas for them. Fuck off! Following Sheely's lima bean ploy, there were multiple noteworthy sightings of the skunk ape in the area during July, specifically around the area of a burned-out wood bridge by Turner Road. On July 16th, a tour bus driver by the name of Steve Goodbread was driving by the area of the burned-out bridge when he and his bus full of tourists spied a large, brownish-colored creature hiding behind some brush. Goodbread described the creature as being 7 feet tall and covered in hair except for his face. According to The Florida Skunk Ape, A Complete History, Goodbread actually encouraged one of the passengers with a telephoto lens to get out of the bus and take a picture. On the 18th, another tour bus driver named Dow Rowland claimed to have seen the creature twice in one day, while taking tourists through the area. On the 21st, a local real estate agent named Jan Brock spotted the alleged skunk ape while driving through the Big Cypress Preserve area. It was within 1,000 feet of her car and resembled a bear, but walking on 2 legs. Brock rolled down her window and was hit with a distinct smell the skunk ape is known for. Finally, there is the experience of Ochopee Fire Chief Vince Dorr. Dorr was driving through the area of the burned-out bridge only a few minutes after Jan Brock, when he spotted the same creature. Dorr had a camera with him and quickly jumped out of his vehicle to take this photo. As I'm sure you can see, the photo could be of virtually anything, and its credibility hinges entirely on Dorr being a trusted member of the local community. Following this rash of skunk ape sightings, Dave Sheely, the aforementioned skunk ape researcher and owner of Skunk Ape Research Headquarters, set out to capture his own images of the creature. Sheely set up multiple tree stands in the local swamp and spent the next year searching for the skunk ape. In September of 1998, he was rewarded with this image of the alleged creature trekking across the swampland. Sheely would return to the area later and make a cast of the creature's supposed footprint that he still has to this day. Then in 2000, Sheely captured this video of a skunk ape meandering through the swamp, before taking off through leg-high water and swamp grass at what Dave estimated to be 22 miles per hour, faster than any human could traverse said terrain. I'll let you come to your own conclusions about the footage. As for Dave Sheely, some have questioned his authenticity as a skunk ape researcher. Sheely calls himself the Jane Goodall of skunk apes and runs a skunk ape gift shop in Ochopee, Florida, where many of the sightings have happened. The July 2000 skunk ape video came out only a year after Sheely applied for a $44,000 research grant from the Collier County Tourism Board. He was apparently so enthusiastic in his attempts to get this grant that the county commission had a plainclothes sheriff's deputy tail Sheely during the meetings where he was present. From the various profiles I've read about Dave Sheely, he comes across almost like a reverse Scooby-Doo villain. In Scooby-Doo, it's always some dude pretending to be a monster to scare people away from something like a hidden oil drilling operation in the swamp, but Sheely seems like he wants to use the skunk ape to bring in tourists and revitalize his part of Florida. Even decades later, he is still trying to spread the good word of the skunk ape, and of Collier County to whatever audience he can. But again, I'll let you come to your own conclusions. Sightings of the skunk ape have continued into the 21st century, and the Florida skunk ape has become a part of Bigfoot lore, on par with the Bigfoot of the Pacific Northwest, yet distinct in its own region-specific way. This is all to say that although the Myakka ape may be the most significant instance of a skunk ape, it is also part of a larger continuum of sightings and encounters. Irrespective of the authenticity of the Myakka ape photos, people are still seeing something strange in Florida. But the question is, what? Unfortunately, there is most likely not a single answer to the question of what are people seeing that they believe to be a skunk ape. There is, of course, the possibility that some of these sightings are hoaxes, either in the sense that people are knowingly making false reports of the skunk ape, or that individuals are creating incidents with the intention of deceiving others into believing that they saw a skunk ape. For whatever reason, there are some people who get a kick out of perpetrating hoaxes. I'm reminded of the story of Tony Signorini, who for almost 30 years put on giant 3-toed cast iron fake feet and left mysterious tracks in the sands of Clearwater Beach, Florida. Why? Because it was funny. But he actually managed to convince one biologist, Ivan T. Sanderson, who believed the tracks were left by a giant penguin. It's hard for me to guess what percentage of skunk ape sightings could be hoaxes. especially the ones that take place in summer. A lot of skunk ape sightings seem to occur from June through September, and the idea of wandering around the Florida backwoods in an ape costume during the height of summer seems like a very stupid idea to me, but who knows. The explanation most often given for Bigfoot sightings in general by skeptics is misidentification of a known animal, usually a bear. Bears are quite large and often have a pungent aroma. They can also stand on their hind legs and even walk in some circumstances. Most notably the case of the famous black bear from New Jersey known by the internet as Petals. There are black bear in South Florida, and I do believe that a lot of skunk ape sightings are misidentified black bears, particularly when it's from a great distance. On the other hand, the Petals case does itself provide a counter-argument to the idea that people are mostly misidentifying aberrant bears. People fairly quickly recognized that Petals was a black bear with some kind of injury that forced it to walk on two legs. It was filmed repeatedly and in high definition. It became a minor celebrity. Whatever people are seeing in Florida is more elusive. The other issue, in my opinion, is that people are saying they're seeing an ape-like creature. As I said during the letter portion of this video, if you're skeptical about the idea that somebody could misidentify the Myakka ape as an orangutan, how can you believe someone could misidentify a bear as a skunk ape? Now, imagine hundreds or thousands of people all making that same mistake over a period of decades. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think it's a bit improbable. I do believe people are misidentifying something though. Florida actually has a pretty big escaped non-native primate problem.
It's a monkey invasion.
They're vicious, they're extreme, they get extremely nasty.
Every morning and every night at 7 on the dot, dozens of rhesus macaques turn Brian Pritchard's backyard into a zoo.
The most famous or infamous case of non-native primates in Florida is probably the population of rhesus macaques in the Silver Springs State Park. In the 1930s, a glass-bottom boat operator by the name of Colonel Toohey released approximately 6 rhesus macaques onto a small island along the Silver River in an attempt to increase tourism. One problem, he didn't realize the monkeys were good swimmers, and they quickly escaped into the wild. They did actually increase tourism though, as people liked watching and feeding the monkeys. So in 1948, Toohey introduced 6 more into the area. By the 1960s, the population had grown to 78, and by the 80s, it was close to 400. And they had spread into the surrounding forest. Since the mid-80s, over 1,000 of these rhesus macaques have been trapped and removed from the area, many of them being sold to primate research companies. This decision was controversial with the public, and as a result, the trapping efforts were halted in 2015. Currently, there are estimated to be around 200 rhesus macaques in the Silver Springs State Park, though the number of monkeys that have escaped into surrounding areas is not known. Oh, and just another tidbit, about a quarter of these monkeys carry a transmittable herpes virus that has proven to be fatal in nearly half of the cases where humans were infected by monkeys in laboratory settings. Remember how the Myakka Ape letter said that escaped monkeys carry hepatitis? It doesn't sound so crazy now, does it? These monkeys are also fucking aggressive. One video of a family being harassed and chased by the monkeys led to areas of the park being closed off in 2017. But here's the thing. The monkeys in Silver Springs may be the most notable example of non-native primates in Florida, but they are not the only ones. There have been several populations of rhesus macaques, squirrel monkeys, and vervet monkeys introduced to Florida over the years. In the 1940s, several vervet monkeys escaped from Anthropoid Ape Research Foundation, a facility in Dania Beach that imported primates from Africa for use in biomedical research. As of 2020, their population is said to be 40 individuals. That doesn't include another group that splintered off from the original Dania colony. In the 1970s, a laboratory animal breeding company by the name of Charles River Laboratories began stocking 2 islands in the Florida Keys with rhesus macaques for biomedical research. 1,383 macaques were placed on Lois Key in 1973. About half of the animals were later moved to Raccoon Key. However, the animals devastated the local mangrove ecosystem. And in 1997, a judge declared that the company had to remove the monkeys from the islands. Noticing a pattern here? This is where I came across something pretty bizarre. The industry of primate breeding in Florida. Hendry County, alone, has 4 separate primate breeding facilities. These aren't small operations either. We're talking thousands of monkeys being bred for medical research. These facilities have frequently been the subject of protests from animal welfare groups as well as concerned locals. One facility in particular, Primate Products, has been accused multiple times of mistreating their animals, as well as posing a health risk to the public. In 2015, a worker at the monkey farm spoke to Wink News and claimed that Primate Products employees were told to perform C-section abortions on pregnant female monkeys, remove the dead fetus, then package it for sale to buyers, among other gruesome procedures. In 2015, PETA released an exposé from an individual who had gone undercover at Primate Products for 8 months. I know people have strong feelings about PETA, but the treatment of the monkeys shown in their undercover footage is fucking disgusting. Monkeys at the Primate Products facility were exposed to near freezing temperatures, neglected, physically abused, denied veterinary treatment for injuries and illness, and had medical procedures performed on them with and without anesthesia, again among other gruesome procedures. PETA's video was enough to cause the USDA to investigate Primate Products, where they found violations of 9 animal welfare laws. Later that year, the company was found to be in compliance with USDA regulations, but questions still remain as to how facilities like Primate Products are legally allowed to conduct procedures like collecting blood and tissue when they are zoned for animal husbandry and agriculture, not medical research. There are also concerns about the government of Hendry County violating Florida's sunshine laws by approving these facilities without allowing residents the opportunity to learn about or comment on them. And I feel like I should remind you that this is just one county. There are similar facilities across South Florida, and there have been attempts to build even more. Just in July of last year, a Chinese-based biological research company named Join Laboratories purchased 1,400 acres in Levy County. According to Stacy Hectus, the county's planning and zoning director, the company reached out with the intention of building a primate quarantine and breeding facility. Thankfully, Levy County only permits research laboratories in industrially zoned areas, and it seems unlikely that they will spot and rezone the land purchased by Join. So far, the company has not officially made a request for rezoning. I'm not trying to turn this into a video about the welfare of research primates and the cruel conditions they are kept in. It's more so to show you that there are a ton of companies breeding apes under secretive conditions with seemingly little government oversight, and we know this has been going on since at least the 40s. This is to say nothing of the pet trade, legal or otherwise. It's illegal to own great apes as personal pets in Florida, but it's illegal to do a lot of things and people still do them. Let's say you illegally own a chimpanzee or orangutan for one reason or another, and it escapes. What are you gonna do? Call the cops? Fish and game? Or are you going to just act like nothing ever happened? And what happens to those apes that get out? Pablo Escobar had 4 hippos, and now there are hundreds in Colombia. It only took Burmese pythons 30 years to take over the Everglades after a reptile breeding facility was destroyed by Hurricane Andrew. All I'm saying is, would it really be that far-fetched to think that known primates like chimps or orangutans have escaped into the Florida wilderness at various points over the last 80 to 90 years? Maybe establishing small colonies, or just lone individuals managing to survive in remote parts of the state, only to be occasionally glimpsed through the palm fronds and swamp grass. I don't think so. Does that explain all or even most of the sightings of the skunk ape? Of course not. Most of them probably have perfectly ordinary explanations, but when so many people are claiming to see an ape, I don't think we can rule out the possibility that they are actually seeing some kind of ape. Whether that be the occasional escaped illegal pet, a zoo animal on the loose, or something from a primate research facility that isn't being monitored all that closely by the government. After saying that, I'm sure there will now be skunk ape believers who ask, if you think there could be a population of escaped apes in the Everglades, then why couldn't there be an undiscovered ape in the same place? That's a valid question. How likely is it that there is a population of large, unknown to science primates living in the Florida wilderness and going largely undetected by humans? I don't think it's impossible. There are countless recorded sightings of what were referred to as monkeys or gorillas by settlers in the South and Midwest, going back hundreds of years, not to mention the traditions of such creatures in indigenous folklore and legend. Perhaps there was a species or species of large ape native to North America. Maybe it was already experiencing some kind of population decline and the arrival of European settlers drove it to the absolute fringes of its natural habitat. There used to be jaguars across much of the southern US before humans virtually wiped them out. We have photos of them. But what if this happened before the camera was invented? Would we just have a bunch of stories of hunters killing big cats that were chalked up to misidentification or folklore, as the historical sightings of apes in North America are? That being said, there is no verifiable evidence of any undiscovered primate living in Florida. No bodies, no bones or teeth, no hair or scat that has been tested and proven to be from a species of ape yet to be described by science. Maybe one day that evidence will come. As of right now, the support for the skunk ape comes almost exclusively from first-hand accounts, which are the least reliable forms of evidence. I started this video off by saying that the Myakka Ape photos are one of the most divisive subjects in the cryptid community. Still to this day, they are hotly debated, even among genuine Bigfoot believers. Aside from the famous Patterson-Gimlin footage, these images are the best photographic evidence of an unknown anthropoid that exists. For more than 20 years, people have been puzzling over them, trying to get to the bottom of what they depicted and who took the photos. Yet we're no closer to an answer now than we were then. They are enigmatic. If these images are a hoax, then they're one of the best hoaxes of all time. Even cases like the Patterson-Gimlin encounter have had people come out of the woodwork claiming to be the guy in the suit, and so forth. We know next to nothing about the Myakka Ape photos, where they were taken, or who took them, much less what they're even photos of. At best, there are a few claims on the internet that the Myakka Ape photos were hoaxed by one of a few known hoaxers. The evidence for such claims is tenuous and circumstantial at best. If it was a person in a suit, we can't find the suit. If it was digitally altered, we don't know what the original image was of. Nobody has stepped up to claim responsibility for these images in over 2 decades. So whoever did it must be extremely dedicated to keeping the nature of these photos a mystery. Maybe in another 20 years we'll get a deathbed confession from someone. Or maybe they'll go to their grave with the truth. Maybe these images are genuinely of something we haven't discovered. As unlikely as this is, I can't say it's impossible. That uncertainty, that mystery, is what draws people to cryptids. Humans are afraid of the unknown, but we're also innately drawn to it. We've ventured into the most remote jungles, delved into the abyss of the oceans, and gone into space in the name of exploration. There are people who wriggle themselves through claustrophobic tunnels just to be the first person who sees the inside of some dank, dark hole in the ground. In an era where it feels like modern society has reached out and left its mark on every corner of the globe, the unknown gives us a sense of comfort, that maybe something is still left to be discovered. And cryptids are a manifestation of that feeling, sometimes frightening, sometimes whimsical. Either way, they bring a slice of the unknown to your very own backyard. If there is a skunk ape stealing apples off your back porch, you don't have to venture into the Amazon or get into a submarine with James Cameron to see something unknown. Cryptids like the skunk ape also offer something for a community to identify with and bond over. Real or fake, they are part of the folklore and tradition of a place. Think back to the small town of Barden and their booger legend. The townsfolk of Barden don't take the booger that seriously, but it's a story that ties the community together in a way. Everyone has heard of it. I think that's why phenomena like cryptids are usually so region-specific. Think of the Jersey Devil in the New Jersey Pine Barrens, or the Mothman of West Virginia. The Midwest has their lycanthropes and dogmen, and the Southwest is UFO Central, and so on and so forth. Cryptids, urban legends, ghost stories, they're part of the story that a community tells about itself. They become points of pride and indicators of who is a local or not. They're reflections of the history and people of a region. They're part of us, really. I don't know whether the Myakka Ape photos are real. I don't know if the skunk ape exists. But I do know that the people of Florida will keep telling each other stories about it, because it's part of the fabric of that region now, and because believing that there is some unknown creature out there makes the world feel just a little more mysterious again. This video was an attempt at something a bit different. I felt like I was in a rut with the content I've been making lately, and I wanted to try a complete left turn into something totally out of the norm. I've always been interested in the paranormal, the unexplained, and cryptids, and working on this video was actually a really refreshing process. I'd like to make more videos like this on a semi-regular basis, so if you guys have any topics about unexplained events, strange mysteries, or cryptid creatures, please leave suggestions in the comments. I would really appreciate it. As always, I want to thank you for watching the video, as well as liking, commenting, and subscribing. And a special thank you to my supporters on Patreon who help make these videos possible. Thank you, Brady, Jonas Namenson, Rusty Shackelford, Iron Shamrock, Jackson, Fightback CBD, Mike Roballs, Laziest Man on Mars, Skunk Ape, Random Candor, Fuzi Eunice, Dot Old Neon, Timothy Lee Peterson, What Gets You Hard Lover, Julius Caesar Has Jungle Fever, Zach Taylor, Firebrand, Snepsts, I Said No Cops, Alex, and Neem.